Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Chuck Manning. I'm with the John Birch Society. I'd like to start tonight with a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much for this beautiful weather we're enjoying. We thank you for the opportunity to be here. We thank you that we have a wonderful speaker here to afford us some education this evening. We thank you that this facility is available to us. We thank you that you gave us Charlie Kirk. We pray for his family. In your name, Lord, we pray for your guidance and direction. Amen. Now then, if you gentlemen would disengage your bonnet and address this flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I have two ladies up here. Obviously, they don't know me very well or they wouldn't be here. I'd like to introduce, to start with, Polly Stickney. She is the field coordinator for Washington and Oregon with the John Birch Society, and she's going to take a few moments to tell you how wonderful she is.
Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a wonderful, I've never been here before. This is just a wonderful place to have an event. I'm so excited to have Rebecca Terrell here. I actually only have two of the recent new Americans, so you're going to have to rush back there, the first two that get there. But Rebecca wrote, I think, two of the articles in the last.
I usually do.
yeah. But they're both great. So, and it's one of my favorite issues. So, if you want one, I'll order more. So just tell Judy, and I'll make sure you get a copy. Judy or Chuck, yeah. And just so glad you're here. How many first timers to a John Birch event? Wow.
Wow.
That is wonderful. So, how many have heard of the John Birch Society before? Okay, yeah. Sometimes we get, like we discussed today, we hear people that we didn't know you were still around, but you guys know Chuck and Judy, I'm sure. So you get the good word, but. This is a great chapter. They do so many awesome things, and we have so many awesome events and around the state. And we spread the word about, well, one thing we do is it's Constitution Day on September 17th. I have constitutions back there, a whole bunch. So if you don't have a pocket constitution, pick it up. But we have a great Constitution is the solution class. If you're interested in it, Chuck and Judy would, I'm sure, love to have another class. But we uphold and defend the Constitution. And one of the wonderful things that we do is print scorecards. Have you seen the legislative scorecards, any of you? So that's been really popular. I've been going around to some of the fairs around the state, and we've been posting the legislative scorecards. We get a lot of people really excited about that, especially if their legislator gets a great score. Some of them don't, but we make sure that the score is how they uphold, how much their votes match the Constitution, and if they're voting the Constitution. So it's a great tool. It's a wonderful tool. It's a way that we can make sure to keep them accountable and that they hear from us. They need to hear from us. So join with us. Love to talk with you afterwards if you're interested in more information. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Polly. For those of you that don't know what the New American is, that is a monthly publication put out by the John Birch Society. If you can read it all from cover to cover, you're better than me. Very interesting. I want you to know, for those of you that don't, the John Birch Society is not a political organization. We are an organization of nationalists, constitutionalists, and we believe in God. I don't care what religion you are. What you're going to hear tonight from Rebecca Terrell, very prolific and accomplished writer. She's a good patriot. She's a good Christian. She even plays the organ in the church. She is from Memphis, Tennessee. She came out here at our request. You'll notice that Trump had to send a National Guard into Memphis today. One of the things that I want you to know, she's going to make a presentation on the Great Reset tonight. Now, some of you may have heard that a young fella down in Utah pulled a trigger earlier this week and ended the life of a wonderful American. What you're going to hear tonight is a discussion about who and what orchestrated that. So much more important than that personal, yes, he's individually responsible for what he did, no question of that. But what inspired him, what directed him, who's in charge? When you watch this presentation tonight, you're going to hear about the very people that inspire those types of actions in our nation. So this lady up here that's going to talk to us has got a pedigree longer than my right arm, I guarantee you. And she ain't all that hard to look at. She's a nice gal. So please sit back. There's coffee, water, there's pop back there. There's cookies back there. You better eat a lot of them or Judy will be upset. And I'm going to get out of the way and turn this over to this very accomplished speaker. And I hope you're as grateful to see what she has to say, listen to what she has to say. There'll be a presentation on these two screens for those of you that are interested and want to follow along. She's got a show to put on. Won't be the kind of shows that Randy normally likes to watch, but it'll be okay.
Oh.
So without any further ado, Miss Rebecca Terrell.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. We've got Derek back there on AV, and y'all are going to have to help me too because I can't see the screens. So you're going to have to tell me what you see on the screen so I can get started with our multimedia presentation. Hang on just a second here. It was all up before, and you close it and okay. I'm so sorry, y'all. Did y'all hear that ticking? I think that's my microphone. What do I need? Where's Derek? Okay, what do you see on the screen right now? Just the slide? Okay, so that's right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And this is my first visit to your beautiful state, and I can tell why you love it. What does that mean? More? Volume up? I don't know how to work it. I'm sorry. He's going to handle it for me. Okay. Oh, he'll take care of the clicking? Okay. But do I need to speak louder? Is that what, can you hear me? Okay. Is that better? Okay, way in the back. They're telling me in the back, thumbs up. Okay. So I can still hear that click. It's going to be like that? Okay. You want me to use this microphone instead? I can. Okay. All right. Technical difficulties. I'm sorry, did somebody say something? My claim to fame, actually, he said that I have a long pedigree. I actually don't. I'm just a kid with some very good parents who raised me right, I think. So they should get the credit for it. But I do have one claim to fame, and that's that I worked for Ron Paul in the 1990s when he was elected back to Congress, and I wrote his American Sovereignty Restoration Act to get us out of the United Nations or end our membership in the United Nations. And that's actually, I'm stretching the truth when I say I wrote it, because I actually just compiled all the bills that had been written since 1945 when we joined that hideous organization to remove our membership. So I just kind of combined them and took all the best parts out of all of them and made the American Sovereignty Restoration Act, which was introduced in its same form up until about 4 years ago when they started, a senator and a congressman started introducing the Defund Act. So everybody should contact their congressmen and their senators and ask them to support the Defund Act. They're trying to defund the United Nations, which will effectively shut it down because we keep it going, right? So why do we want to get out of the United Nations? What do you see on the screen now? Did I not? Same thing? I can't see what. This isn't cooperating with me. Derek, can you come up here, please? I'm so sorry, y'all. This is some technical. I wasn't having these issues beforehand. It hasn't changed? I know. We need to go on. Arrow key? Oh. Can I just back out of it and come back in? Sometimes that works. What do you see now? Same thing?
Still not showing anything?
No.
I think
hang
you're going to
on.
be in slideshow.
Wait, what happened?
You got to go back into your PowerPoint.
You can't read it?
Okay, and then go back to slideshow.
Okay, now.
No, go ahead. Hit
I can hit that now. Okay, it's working correctly. What do you see now? Same thing? What do you see now? Okay, we're doing it. All right, so my question was, why is it important to get out of the United Nations? And their answer is, of course, because we want no part of this godless world government that they have planned. And of course, what's going on right now, the title of this presentation is The Diabolic Origins of the Great Reset, because that's the most recent catchphrase that these devils have plastered on their plans, but it's been known by many names throughout history. I mean, we know in the 20th century it was communism, and it's been known as Jacobinism, and Frankists, and all these other names. They change the names just to keep you thinking that it's not organized. It's not as organized as it is. But these are all heads on the same hydra, but the trunk of that hydra is, of course, the New World Order. Now, of course, major media and leftists scoff at us conspiracy theorists. They say that the New World Order is this conspiracy theory which hypothesizes a secretly emerging totalitarian world government. That's what Wikipedia has to say about it. But of course, the fact checkers at Wikipedia assure us that New World Order only refers to world governance in the sense of a new collective effort to identify and understand and address global problems that go beyond the capacity of individual nation states to solve. You know, problems like COVID and climate change and gender equality and all these things they have coming down the pike. Now, the John Birch Society defines it more simply. It's world government and tyranny and bondage for all but the elite rulers. So who's right? Well, let's look at some conspiracy theorists. During Trump's first campaign, his Secretary of State said that President Donald Trump was building a new world order. And his predecessor, Joe Biden, well, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, his predecessor, Joe Biden was a big fan of the New World Order. In 2022, he told the Business Roundtable that there's going to be a New World Order out there and we've got to lead it. He said similar things when he was vice president to Obama, to a speech at the Export-Import Bank in 2013. He said the affirmative task we have now is actually to create a New World Order. He even said the same thing when he was a senator. He wrote an editorial in the Wall Street Journal how he described how I learned to love the New World Order. And in the op-ed, he proposed handing over control of the US military to the UN Security Council. Now, nearly all of Obama's cabinet, 24 in all, there were members of the CFR, and we're going to get to that. You probably have heard of the Council on Foreign Relations if you've been reading anything in this realm. But this is the devil who's been pulling a lot of strings, Henry Kissinger. I know you're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but then again, you have to be human for that to apply. He said that he was referring to Obama's administration when he wrote, I think Obama's task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. So you hear this phrase repeated over and over and over again, new world order, new world order. And these people aren't talking about Wikipedia's definition of it. They're talking about the Birch Society definition of it. So who knew that all these people were conspiracy theorists, right? Well, Henry Kissinger ought to know. He'd been pulling the strings of the deep state for years, for decades. One of the most ruthless traitors to our nation ever to walk on American soil. He helped to set up Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia in the 1970s. He helped to fund Latin American dictatorships through the decades, and of course opened the floodgates of American tax dollars to China when he was Secretary of State to Nixon. He even wrote a book in 2014 called World Order, and suffice it to say, he was not talking about mere collective efforts to help solve global problems. But now Bill Clinton was also a big fan of the New World Order. In 2003, he spoke about this and said, and that he quoted President Bush, his predecessor. He said, it's a phrase I often use myself. We need a new world order. So you see, we have Republicans and Democrats alike saying the same thing. My mother used to say she believes in a two-party system, and one of those parties was the Republican Democrat. This is what she was talking about, right? His wife, when she was Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, expressed pleasure that the CFR had opened a new office in Washington, D.C. The main headquarters is in New York City. She said, we get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have to go as far to be told what we should be doing. That was your Secretary of State. But again, it was not just limited to Democrats. George H.W. Bush was a CFR member and since the 1970s and was among the founding members of the Trilateral Commission in 1973. That's an international version of the Council on Foreign Relations. Again, we're going to get into what CFR is, but just suffice to know that that was his, and the Trilateral Commission was spearheaded by John D. Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski to foist technocracy on us, which is world government rule by the elite through advanced technology. which is what we have going on right now, right? George H.W. Bush, on the threshold of the Persian Gulf War, told Congress that one of the purposes of the conflict, he actually admitted this, was establishment of a new world order, which he described as military merger of countries worldwide under command of the UN Security Council. And he defined the new world order as, quote, a world in which nations recognize the shared responsibility for freedom and justice, the vision that I shared with President Gorbachev in Helsinki. Now, this is a partial list of the murderous resume of that monster, and he thinks that he's going to promote freedom and justice. So their world government vision actually doesn't just stop with the military, however. It was in 1992 that this same George Bush got us entangled in Agenda 21 at the Earth Summit in Rio. And of course, the latest update to that document is Agenda 2030 with its 17 sustainable development goals, which the entire goal is control not just over our military, but over every area of life. Economy, education, industry, law enforcement. He mentioned that they're sending the feds to Memphis. They're federalizing our police forces. They're even going to control your consumption patterns and your social interactions. Remember masking during COVID and how many of us allowed ourselves to be labeled as not essential, as non-essential? This is why we want no part of the United Nations. But it didn't start in Rio in 1992. The day Reagan died, Bush told reporters, this is a quote, a lot happened on his watch that was very positive towards a new world order. And that's because Reagan's administration was filled with CFR and Trilateral Commission members, and David Rockefeller was one of his best friends. David Rockefeller is the deep state financier who bragged in his 2002 memoirs about his family's crucial role in the New World Order. He crowed that they were a part of, this is a quote, a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States. Bet you didn't know he was a conspiracy theorist. Now, Jimmy Carter had a different term for deep state operatives. He called them the insiders, and he promised during his campaign, quote, the people of this country know from bitter experience that we're not going to get these changes merely by shifting around the same groups of insiders. The insiders have had their chance and they have not delivered. Now, his advisor credited with this rhetoric was Hamilton Jordan, who a few weeks prior to the 1976 election stated this: if after the inauguration you see a Cy Vance as Secretary of State or Zbigniew Brzezinski as head of national security, then I would say we failed and I would quit. We're going to see new faces and new ideas. I'll give you $5 if you can guess who served as Jimmy Carter's Secretary of State and Jimmy Carter's National Security Advisor. Now, Brzezinski, I already mentioned him. He previously taught at Harvard and Columbia. He served in the State Department under Johnson and authored numerous works for establishment publications. Cy Vance was a Wall Street lawyer, chairman of the Rockefeller Foundation, veteran of service in the Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon administrations, and both of them were members of the CFR and the Trilateral Commission. Jimmy Carter's string pullers certainly didn't start things, though. Just prior to his election, more than 100 members of our Congress on the 200th anniversary of the signing of our Declaration of Independence at Congress Hall in Philadelphia signed the Declaration of Interdependence in mockery of our declaration. You see that it says, when in the course of history the threat of extinction confronts mankind, it's necessary for the people of the United States to declare their interdependence with the peoples of all nations and embrace those principles and build those institutions which will enable mankind to survive and flourish. 2 centuries ago, our forefathers brought forth a new nation. Now we must join together with others to bring forth a new world order. He said it right there, and 100 members of our Congress signed it. Most of them rescinded their signatures because of work of the John Birch Society. But there's that phrase again. Now, notice something he said earlier. We're threatened with extinction. Mankind is threatened with extinction. And of course, he's talking about military dangers. right? But this was just 8 years prior to when that depopulationist worm, Paul Ehrlich, published his Population Bomb book, saying that humanity would soon so encumber the earth as to destroy it entirely. So which is it? Are we facing extinction? Or are we going to kill Mother Earth by our very existence? But words mean whatever a radical needs them to mean at the time that he says them. In 1972, a very delightful man named Professor Roy Colby published the Communist English Dictionary, identifying terms that are twisted in communist philosophy: truth, honor, loyalty, personal property, respect for life, free market. These were some of the many terms that became petty and bourgeois and unjust. Fraudulent slogans are a hallmark of the conspiracy. Liberté, égalité, fraternité was the battle cry of the French Revolution. Its literal meaning is liberty, equality, and brotherhood, but its communist meaning is slavery, injustice, and hatred. Interestingly, George Orwell's word for the insiders was the inner party. So I guess he was a conspiracy theorist too, right? Knowing how they twist words gives a sinister sound to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It was that organization, along with the Rockefeller Foundation, that funded the World Order Models Project, founded by Saul Mendelwitz in the 1960s. He said that there's no longer a question of whether or not there'll be world government by the year 2000. The questions are how it will come into being. And then he went on to predict that world government will come about by arms races, outbreaks of violence, food, population, environmental imbalances. Does this sound familiar to anybody? And to combat all of this, we need disarmament, a world police force, and world government. We don't want any part of this, do we? You know who else was a conspiracy theorist? President Kennedy gave a speech in 1961 that's very famous for one line in which he said the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. You're familiar with that phrase? But this is what came after that that's not so often quoted. We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed. Now, he went on to absent the United States from this international conspiracy, and he warned the members of the press who were there not to print anything that would give our adversaries any insider information. But it's interesting, though, that this is also the president whose CFR-dominated State Department crafted the plan for disarming America. You see that little bluish book right there? It's called Freedom from War, the United States Program for General and Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World. Odd that he would think the world peaceful amidst that monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that he described. And surely he didn't think America was peaceful at that time. The Vietnam War was raging, and on our shores there were the college riots of the 1960s, communist labor movements, and race agitation heavily financed by the Rockefeller Foundation, family-destroying women's liberation movement, attempts by the Chicano Republic and the American Indian movement to set up independent nations in the midst of our southwestern states, into which the Ford Foundation poured millions. This was the age of school busing and desegregation, which forces all that brotherhood of the French Revolution on us and only stirs up racial agitation. The conspirators do everything they possibly can at every natural or manufactured opportunity and create hatred between whatever divisions within the human race they can find: color, ethnicity, age, race, sex, religion, economic status. When they're trying to enforce brotherhood and equality, by passing laws that favor one group over another, you know they're speaking communese. And that is why Robert Welch founded the John Birch Society in 1958. He warned then of the long-range plan to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty to these conspirators. Now, he was not the first one, though. Just before Welch issued those warnings, Senator Joseph McCarthy had tried to alert Americans to communist infiltration into every aspect of society back in the 1950s. Those who worked against him were rewarded. Nathan Pusey is one example. That's his picture there. He became president of Harvard. But McCarthy is still maligned today. They've added a word to the dictionary, McCarthyism. You know what that means. You're labeled with that. That's the scarlet letter M. You have it forever. But McCarthy's charges were not unsubstantiated. In 1953, congressional investigator Norman Dodd was peppering the head of the Ford Foundation with inquiries about questionable funding of communist causes by tax-exempt foundations like his, and he got this rather perturbed confession when he said, "You might as well know the truth. We're working under a directive to change the economic and political structure of the United States so that it can be comfortably merged with Soviet Russia." Soviet Russia, the mothership of communism. And with whom did we ally in World War I and World War II? And to whom did we hand North Korea and Vietnam? Why did we deliberately sacrifice 3,000 of our servicemen and one half of our Navy at Pearl Harbor in 1941? And after that excuse to get us into the war, we kind of ignored Japan, didn't we? We went over to Europe to protect the Soviets from German occupation, from the German armies. In General MacArthur's 1964 memoirs, he printed a memo by Chinese Communist General Lin Piao saying he would never have attacked American forces in Korea unless he had been assured that President Truman would restrain MacArthur. These are some of the culprits. Edward Mandell House is there in the middle with Woodrow Wilson, and then you see a whole bunch of other secretaries of state right next to the presidents they served. And not pictured here are two notable CFR devils. Most of these are CFR members. Truman got us into the Korean War in the 1950s, only it wasn't a war. Congress never declared it to be so. But what does that matter to a globalist? It set a precedent that has been followed by many of his successors, most recently Donald Trump, right? Dwight Eisenhower was a CFR member and got us involved in the Vietnam conflict. Oh, but it wasn't a war. It wasn't declared so by Congress. It went on for 20 years. Now, these are some of the men who make the world safe for democracy. There's some communies for you. Did they succeed? Well, in their terms, Robert Welch wrote that the conspirators employ war as a regular tool to be used without the slightest moral compunction whenever it's needed. Communist forces across the globe have U.S. officials to thank for their success. George Marshall gave China to Mao Zedong. Zbigniew Brzezinski handed Cambodia to Pol Pot's murderous Khmer regime in the 1970s. And Edward Lansdale was a subversive agent in the State Department and arranged money and resources for Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. In 1973, to add insult to injury, Henry Kissinger and Liu Duc-Ta won the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering peace in Vietnam. But remember, we're talking communese, so that peace meant communist takeover and murder of countless numbers and slavery for the survivors. And likewise, of course, with the help of then General Dwight Eisenhower and our State Department, Stalin liberated Albania, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Poland in the 1940s, but of course, liberated in communist terms. Such conspirators met in 1944 at the Dumbarton Oaks Conference, which laid the groundwork for fulfillment of their plans for a one-world government by founding the United Nations in 1945. Within 5 years, America would learn that its Secretary General at the UN's founding conference in San Francisco was a communist spy, Alger Hiss. He'd been handpicked by John Foster Dulles, who, with Edward Mandell House, had helped form the World Government Trial Run League of Nations under Woodrow Wilson. Now, we should not have been surprised by this kind of plotting. In 1922, more than 100 years ago, Local and state law enforcement officers in Michigan raided the secret convention of the Communist Party of America. In 1924, R.M. Whitney published his book, Reds in America, that described what they found. The documents they seized proved infiltration in every political party at the time. This is 1922. Every trade, labor, agricultural union, the feminist movement, news and media, stage and screen, schools, colleges, universities, and the American military. The cancer was growing at a healthy pace in every single one of our bureaucratic agencies, but most especially the State Department and the Treasury. Now, is it just coincidence that 1 year prior to Bridgman, the insiders founded the Council on Foreign Relations? With one exception, every U.S. Secretary of State since 1940 has been a CFR or Trilateral Commission member or both. Each Secretary of War or Defense, nearly all CIA directors, and every key U.S. national security and foreign policy advisor has been a CFR member since that time. There were 47 CFR members in the U.S. delegation to the founding conference of the UN, and Alger Hiss was one of them. Incidentally, the logo there is interesting. The raised hand is called the sign of admiration and astonishment that these insiders give to one another. It's a Masonic symbol. All of this is a Masonic symbol. But you'll notice on the scroll beneath the horse, there's the Latin word ubique, which means everywhere or omnipresent. They were bragging that they were already everywhere in 1921. Now, these are a few of the conspirators. Do you think that our recent elections are stolen? These are some of the men who always made sure their puppets occupied the White House in the late 19th and early 20th century. And they started whittling away at our very Constitution with amendments that made it look more and more like the Communist Manifesto. They perverted education. John Dewey was one of the CFR's founding members. He helped implement a Marxist system of education in Russia in 1928 and then returned to the United States and became president of the National Education Association. The essential purpose of education is to form children into virtuous adults. John Dewey turned that on its head. He turned control of education over to the state, and he taught kids what to think instead of how to think. So school naturally became a breeding ground for the nanny state. Dewey's inspiration was Horace Mann. Known as the father of American public education, he was born in 1796, and he's the father of American public education. He's the one who took education out of the hands of parents and turned it over to the governments. And these changes, of course, were masked under the communist terms like reform and modern and sophisticated. The Horace Mann of Europe was German philosopher George Hegel, who believed that the state, the government, was actually God, and he was Marx's inspiration. The conspirators perverted religion with the establishment of the National Council of Churches in 1908. Can you believe that it's that old? And the World Council of Churches in 1948, which is a terrifying year. Interestingly, these only involve Christian religions because Christianity is what must be diluted and emasculated. The other religions don't get in Satan's way. These organizations advocate for world government because, after all, who needs God when you've got the UN, right? Speaking of religious perversion, the American Civil Liberties Union was founded by a Methodist minister who claimed to be a Christian socialist, even though there's no such thing. Dr. Harry F. Ward directed infiltration of various denominations to achieve betrayal from within. Agents entered seminaries, and by 1953, in Norman Dodd's congressional investigation, he proved that at least 3% of American clergymen were card-carrying communists. That year, former Communist Party official Manning Johnson told Congress that Ward had been the chief architect for communist infiltration and subversion in the religious field. And remember, this was back at a time when we didn't have all of these manifest organizations. The ACLU held a lot of power and a lot of sway. The ACLU was founded the year before the CFR, 1920, by both Harry Ward and Roger Baldwin, who was a draft dodger and a labor relations agitator. One of the earliest moves of the ACLU was to bail several communist agents out of jail. They had instigated labor strikes in North Carolina in the 1920s and were on trial for conspiracy to kill the chief of police. When the U.S. House investigated communist activities in the United States in the 1930s, and yes, they investigated, McCarthy never came up with anything on his own. He found the results of these investigations and tried to publicize them. So his work was mostly not his own. He never claimed it was, but that's why he was vilified for publicizing this. But the committee reported that the ACLU was a communist front organization and its main function was to protect communists who were trying to overthrow the American government. Prior to that, in the 1920s, the New York State legislature declared that the ACLU was a subversive organization that worked to protect criminals and attack American institutions. Now, worse still was the concerted perversion of innocence and of marriage and of the family and of morals. Despite clamoring for women's rights, Margaret Sanger made women sex objects by desecrating the marital act to strip it of its true purpose. Her life's work was birth control, and her legacy is the murder of countless babies. What happened to be fruitful and multiply? No, that doesn't apply to us. We don't need to do things God's way. We can be our own gods. And by the way, John D. Rockefeller became a large regular funding source for Sanger. And there's that name again. And of course, the Rockefellers did not have a monopoly on the New World Order. We've already mentioned the Ford Foundation, whose namesake is Henry Ford, and the Carnegie Endowment. We'd be remiss if we didn't also mention J.P. Morgan. These financiers, to finance all this destruction of what we should justly call the New World Disorder, wealthy globalist elites like this instituted in 1930 the Bank of International Settlements, and I'd recommend that book by Adam Labor about the Tower of Basel. It's in Basel, Switzerland. It's the bank of central banks and pursues global financial stability, of which we see so much these days. But remember, we're speaking communese here. To this day, this bank is protected by an international treaty. No government has any jurisdiction over it. No economic crisis touches it. Its profits are tax-free. It's financed both sides in most wars, including World War II and on. And it was behind the launch of the euro in 2002. And in 2020, its general manager, Augustin Carstens, announced that they are planning central bank digital currency, CBDC. And he said, this is programmable money. It can be turned on and turned off, regardless of how you feel about it. And the bank will have total control. And that's a direct quote. He said, the bank will have total control. Now, this trick of funding both sides in every war was actually perfected by the Rothschild family in the early 1800s. What they started has become the game plan of international bankers ever since. Robert Welch summed up their work by saying that some of them have demonstrated convincingly what Satan could do if only he had enough money. Our own monetary system had already been hijacked 20 years prior to the Bank for International Settlements. Jekyll Island, Georgia witnessed a meeting in 1910 when Wall Street planned its takeover of the bank reserves of the entire country by laying the foundation of the Federal Reserve System. This is a private banking cartel established in 1930. It operates under the protection of the federal government to this day, and these are the men who quite literally made money to make it useless. They took our gold and gave us paper in return. And prior to this demolition of our money, the insiders had already effectively taken control of our government by establishing the federal bureaucracy. The first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, founded the Department of Agriculture in 1862. Actually, it was prior to that, in 1849, that under the very brief Taylor administration, that the Department of Interior came into being. They said it was to manage federal lands in the West. Well, we already had the land office. It was doing quite a good job in that, promoting westward expansion. No, the Department of Interior wasn't founded to promote westward expansion. It was founded to control the land and the resources of the land, the water, the minerals, the timber, the land use. And what do we see today? It's doing a good job, isn't it? More than 20 years after Abraham Lincoln and the Lincoln administration, I would argue with anybody, we can talk after if you want to, was the worst presidential administration of our entire American history. And we can go up, just that nobody else could have done what they did without him opening the floodgates and really launching the fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy. But 20 years later, Grover Cleveland signed the Interstate Commerce Commission into law. That was 1887. So they were going to regulate the railroads so the little guy, would be protected. But what they did was they created a monopoly for the big railroads, shoved the mom and pops out of business. Is this familiar? Does this theme sound familiar? It should. They're doing it to us now. They did it with COVID. Your communist radar should be going mad right now. It really put all the small rail lines out of business, established relative monopolies for the large railroads, and then proceeded to do the same thing to trucking when it came in, and later to airline transportation. The cover of Dan Smoot's 1973 book, The Business End of Government, describes our federal bureaucracy to a T. Now, meanwhile, the conspiracy, of course, was alive and well in Europe. In England, the Fabian Society, founded in 1884, started the slow march of socialism in Britain, funded by the internationalist bankers, of course. Their logo could not be more descriptive. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. We can credit the Fabians with making England an easy prey for absorption into the New World Order. The insiders of Italy exercised a more militant activism, also backed by internationalist bankers like the Rothschilds. The stated goal of the Carbonari was to destroy government and the church. John Wilkes Booth was a member. So is Giuseppe Garibaldi, whom Abraham Lincoln wanted to lead the Union Army in the American War, the Civil War. He turned him down because he said he wanted to spill the Pope's blood. But the devil of all devils was Giuseppe Mazzini. He inserted Carbonari into masonry and politics, and wherever they established foothold, education was secularized. Goods of religious orders were confiscated, crushing taxes were placed on churches, matrimony was secularized, divorce legalized, candidates for the priesthood were conscripted into military service. And to get any situation of value or prestige, you had to be a Freemason or at least have powerful Masonic influence working for you, if that doesn't sound familiar. In the U.S., such conspirators were known as the Social Democrats or the Democrat societies who advanced socialism within whatever political party happened to be popular at the time. E.M. Stanton was one of the framers of the war and the horrible Reconstruction that followed. All of this was orchestrated. The American Civil War did not happen organically. And of course, Reconstruction, there's a communist word for you, right? Meanwhile, Charles Darwin was busy dusting off the naturalism of ancient Greece in the 6th century, BC. I can't even pronounce these old Greek names. Anaximander proposed that life originated in water and humans evolved from fish. And Democritus and Epicurus developed atomism, which is the belief that tiny particles came together and resulted in life. Charles Darwin was a plagiarist. He stole all of these ideas from the ancient Greeks, figuring that nobody had read them, and most people didn't know. So his erroneous ideas have nevertheless replaced biblical creationism as the scientific norm today. Along with the Fabians in England, the Carbonari in Italy, and the Social Democrats in the US, the master conspiracy spawned the communist movement in the 1840s. Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto was printed in 1848. It preached destruction of the old order and construction of a new one. This is the arm of the master conspiracy that would eventually encompass and absorb the Carbonari and the Fabians. And notice, too, let's not forget that the first edition, that edition printed in 1848, was printed in London, where Marx was living in exile because both France and Germany had booted him for his radicalism. So who funded the printing of that filthy document and its subsequent translation within just a few years into 30 languages and hundreds of editions? I can promise you it was not the working poor of Germany or the peasants of Russia who funded that, no. It was Americans, actually, like Jacob Schiff and William Boyce Thompson, who financed Leon Trotsky, Vladimir Lenin, and others would follow suit with Joseph Stalin. They made possible the Russian Revolution and its aftermath, which established communist rule and murdered millions in the process. On July 14th, 1856, British statesman Benjamin Disraeli openly complained about these activities and motives to England's House of Commons. He said that the whole of Europe is covered with a network of these secret societies. They do not want constitutional government. They do not want better institutions. They want to change the tenor of land, to drive out the present owners of the soil and put an end to ecclesiastical, that's church establishments. That's 1856. They were following in the footsteps of their progenitors who funded the French Revolution. The result was official abolishment of the Catholic Church in France and the enthronement of the goddess Reason, who was personified by a well-known prostitute. They put her on the high altar in a Notre Dame cathedral and bowed down to her. The cult of Reason became the official state religion of France during the French Revolution. And interestingly, the fomenters of the French Revolution also perfected the art of using native crowds converted into criminal mobs by trained hoodlums. Does that sound familiar? Right? What happened in Black Lives Matter and January 6th? We're certainly suffering from our modern ignorance of history, aren't we? There's a distinct difference between the French and the American revolutions, which were going on simultaneously. The French didn't want a political revolution, freeing their nation from oppression. They wanted a social revolution, destroying traditional foundations and values. There's an interesting lesson in the story of the French ambassador to the United States during the French Revolution. He attempted unsuccessfully to draw the U.S. into the French war with England, and because he failed, his murderous superiors recalled him in 1794, and he refused to go because he knew exactly what would happen. So instead, he bought a farm on Long Island, became an American citizen, and enjoyed the fruits of true freedom until his death at age 71, which actually was quite a ripe old age at that time. The U.S. didn't fall for the French Revolution, but its shores were nonetheless infected, unfortunately. A group called the Illuminati established foothold in the U.S. in its earliest days. The 1794 Whiskey Rebellion in Pennsylvania provides a good example. When President George Washington sent troops to Harrisburg, they found French flags flying over the courthouse, which indicated a link with the godless French Revolution. About the Whiskey Rebellion, George Washington wrote, "I consider this insurrection as the first formidable fruit of the democratic societies," and our nation's first Chief Justice, John Jay, wrote, "The Jacobins are still more numerous, more desperate, and more active in the country than is generally supposed." Now, these different names, democratic societies, Jacobins, they're all referring to the same thing, okay? They use different names to keep us thinking that they're splintered groups. So Robert Welch wrote that it was actually all of them belonged to Weishaupt's legion of arch criminals and traitors who contrived to bring about the French Revolution and all of this other upheaval. Now, this Weishaupt was Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Illuminati on May 1st, 1776, with the goal of world government through destruction of all established government, religion, and traditional institutions. Whether any action was good or bad depended not on God's law or even natural virtue, but entirely on whether it served the purposes of the order. Killing millions is good if it forwards the cause. Telling the truth is bad if it harms the cause. So that explains the horror of the French Revolution. It explains Giuseppe Mazzini, who was Weishaupt's successor as head of the Illuminati. It explains the Napoleonic Wars and revolutions throughout the 19th century. It explains our funding of the likes of Pol Pot and Mao Zedong and Trotsky and Lenin, right? That's the reason the Roman numeral 1776 appears on the back of the Great Seal of the United States. The emblem of the Illuminati commemorates its founding year. The image describes the framework of the organization, a pyramid to depict hierarchy. Its decreasing number of stones rising from the base to the top represents initiates who entered and are gradually weaned out, either promoted or weaned out. The all-seeing eye at the top symbolizes Freemasonry's great architect of the universe, not our God. The words annuit ceptis mean he has favored our undertaking, while the scroll beneath bears the Latin inscription Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. Now, this image was not drawn by Adam Weishaupt. It was actually the brainchild of Francis Hopkinson, William Barton, and Charles Thomson. You probably don't know their names. But they drew that image, and they crafted the back of the Great Seal of the United States, which was approved by Congress in 1789, only 13 years after the founding of the Illuminati, signaling that group's influence on our nation from its earliest days. The fact that it was placed on the reverse side of the Great Seal, which was a first in history, no seals had a reverse side. You know, a signet ring, you take off and you put your seal in the wax. You don't have a reverse side. But the fact that it was placed on the reverse side indicates the hidden secret workings of the organization. And of course, over time, it was largely forgotten. But the reason it's familiar to you is because it's on the back of the $1 bill. FDR's agriculture secretary, General Henry Wallace, stumbled on it, and he later described the incident in a 1951 letter. He said the Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum impressed me as meaning the New Deal of the ages. And of course, FDR's New Deal, he was making that link, right? Therefore, I took the publication to President Roosevelt and suggested a coin be put out with the obverse and reverse sides of the seal. Roosevelt was first struck with the representation of the all-seeing eye, a Masonic representation of the great architect of the universe. Next, he was impressed with the idea that the foundation for the new order of the ages had been laid in 1776, but that it would be completed only under the eye of the great architect. It's the eye of Horus, by the way. Roosevelt, like myself, was a 32nd degree Mason. He suggested that the seal be put on the dollar bill rather than a coin and took the matter up with the Secretary of the Treasury. Now, Wallace was rewarded with the vice presidency later, 1941 to 1945. And then after that, he ran for president on the Progressive Party ticket in 1948, again, a terrifying year. The Communist Party of the United States gave him a resounding endorsement, which he accepted. These conspirators, William Pitt, this is a very interesting quote. I want y'all to pay attention to the year, because this was 6 years prior to the founding of the Illuminati. William Pitt, Earl of Chatham, complained in the House of Lords that all of the secret treachery he was seeing in Europe, in the court in England, has at length unwillingly convinced me that there is something within the court greater than the king himself. But Weishaupt did not come up with these ideas on his own. William Pitt was exactly right. His progenitors were the clever fools of the Enlightenment in the 16th and 17th century. The consistent message among all of them was tearing down tradition and replacing it with the latest version of modernism. Basically, we don't need to do it God's way. We can do it our own way. We can be our own gods. And is it any wonder that atheism flourished under their watch? But of course, their inspiration came, they weren't original thinkers either. Their inspiration came from men like Francis Bacon, the father of empiricism, which is a theory that holds that truth comes from our own intellects. We don't need God. We can be our own gods. His ideas came from Niccolo Machiavelli, the father of modern political science. Look at the years he lived. He preached situation ethics, the end justifies the means, and argued that religion was man-made. He emancipated politics from theology and morals, but he didn't come up with anything on his own. He was inspired by men like Petrarch, the father of humanism, who coined the term Dark Ages to say everybody who came before him had no understanding of anything. It took him. Abelard inspired Machiavelli and Petrarch by secularizing education. This was back, look at the years he lived. We don't need God in the classroom. We can be our own gods. It's always the same theme. Do you see how it's always the same theme? New World Order. We don't need God. We need the UN now, right? Now, of course, we don't have time to keep going on back through the centuries, but do you see the pattern? Right? The same theme running throughout history. Elites always wanting to set themselves up as gods in control of everything. The despots of the 19th and 20th centuries, the radicals of Jacobinism, the Illuminati. The Caesars of Rome declared themselves to be God, right? The pharaohs of Egypt, they were all reputed gods, right? In fact, the very first time man tried to set up world government was at the Tower of Babel. Nimrod wanted to build a tower to the heavens so he could set himself up as God. It's interesting that the European Parliament building in Strasbourg resembles Bruegel's 1563 painting of the Tower of Babel. That painting was also the inspiration for a 1992 promotional poster by the Council of Europe's Cultural Cooperative Initiative. So your communist radar should be beeping right now. And notice the pentagrams above the Tower of Babel. They're being very obvious about their intention, aren't they? That was the first attempt at world government, but was it the very first time we ever heard, "You will be like gods"? No, we know that story. That was in the Garden of Eden, and it was spoken by Satan when man was still innocent. And Satan promised Adam and Eve that if they disobeyed gods, they would be like gods. It's the same lie, repeated century after century after century. And it's the same lie that modern reptiles are repeating. So should we be surprised? They want to enslave us just as and he is the one who's controlling it all. That's why it has this centuries long continuum, right? They want to enslave us just like Satan wanted to enslave Adam and Eve. This is a spiritual battle at the heart of it that we're fighting. It's showing itself in temporal ways. We are both spiritual and temporal beings. We're material and spiritual. So you can't deny the one. You can't ignore the one. Right? So let's fast forward from the Garden of Eden to the future. So what do we do about this? Right now I have to interrupt myself and say I've not been watching the clock. As I told Judy I wouldn't. Am I doing okay on time? I'm good? Okay. Because I don't want to bore anybody. Okay, so here's the virtual Tower of Babel. They actually admit they're calling it the Tower of Babel. They're constructing the Tower of Babel. We're going to get to that. So what is all this? The Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, the singularity. This is what they have planned. I'm going to fast forward through some of this because I know I can't get through it. I think I have about 10 minutes left. I always used to wonder who depopulationists like Prince Philip planned to employ to clean their houses and do their laundry. Remember when Nancy Pelosi said they needed to import? Yep. Okay, we're good. Y'all can hear? Oh, that's better without that tick, 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 isn't it? We should have done that from the start. So anyway, the answer, I got my answer with AI. They're planning to replace all of us useless eaters with AI. AI will do what we were always there to do before, and we will be non-essential. Remember how many of us accepted that label during COVID? If I get too far away from the microphone and say, get back. Okay. But that's not all, actually. The elites, the ones who deem themselves worthy to inherit the earth, are planning immortality for themselves. That certainly sounds like science fiction, I know, but in 2018, the Vatican hosted a seminar called The Morality of Immortality, which was attended by representatives of many major religions, as well as leading experts like CNN medical anchor Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and of course the now retired National Institutes of Health director, Dr. Francis Collins, who was Anthony Fauci's boss during COVID. right? Collins gushed about NIH research funded by your tax dollars, right? Which has been manipulating the genes of roundworms to extend their lives 4 to 5 times longer than their expected lifespan. The attendees closed this meeting with a short-term goal of extending human life to 120 years and a long-term goal of extending it indefinitely. Now, of course, the immortality they have planned is transhumanism, which is the merger of man with machine, but the stepping stone to that is transgenderism. You can choose your own gender, right? You don't need God, right? This is transhumanist Ray Kurzweil literally says people will merge with the digital world to become gods. What they're planning on doing, literally, they say this. They're going to upload their brains into the cloud and not need a body anymore, and they'll live forever, right? In the documentary, The Life and Ideas of Ray Kurzweil, he asks, does God exist? And he answers, I would say not yet. He's going to be a God, right? He calls the moment that this happens the singularity, which I don't really know what that means, how that equates. But anyway, this is when humans finally merge with technology to be what he calls spiritual machines that will live forever. And they're indoctrinating kids with it on TV and social media. But all of that you could say is, well, that's just fiction. But tell that to our Department of Defense. It's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and you know it as DARPA probably, has been researching nano and cyborg technology for more than a decade. Actually going on 2 decades now. Since 2018, their Brainstorms initiative has successfully injected servicemen with nanobots, allowing them to communicate telepathically with their computers, and the computers answer back. Now, in 2018, the good folks at National Geographic made a documentary about all of these eventualities. It was called Year Million, and it had several episodes in the series. The fourth of the series is focused on an interesting and disturbing theme, building a new Tower of Babel in the digital sphere. And what you see on the screen is a screenshot from the documentary. Here's a quote from the episode. We're headed to a future that will make the Tower of Babel look like a Lego set. Connecting everyone brain to brain will catapult humanity forward on our journey to that future Tower of Babel. Just imagine the implications. I'm like, that's like making a new airline and calling it Icarus Airways. I mean, you know it's going to fail, right? This episode featured an interview with this particular reptile who said that we will become the gods that we once feared and worshipped. This is the founder, he's a theoretical physicist, and he founded string field theory. And this is World Economic Forum advisor Yuval Noah Harari, who talks about building digital dictatorships by hacking organisms. And he envisions a world where elites gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. He bragged that many tyrants and governments wanted to do it in the past, Gestapo, KGB, but if we succeed, it will be the greatest revolution in history. Science is replacing evolution, not by natural selection, but by intelligent design. Not the intelligent design of some god above the clouds. He said this. But our intelligent design, which he said is stored in the cloud. Now, these are the fellows who talk about the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all this. And we know what the outcome is going to be, but we also know every time, God wins, right? Every time. He won from when Eve ate the apple. We got kicked out of the garden, right? There's something bad always happens. Do we really want to sit here and wait for that retribution that God always sends us in order for us to do penance and become holy after we allow something like this to happen? Now, I don't want to leave you, though, feeling like there's no hope. Of course there's hope, because God does always win, right? We have to be his tools that he uses and leave ourselves at his disposal. I want you to know that, well, first of all, does anybody, wait, that's not supposed to just play on its own. Did it start playing? Are y'all familiar with that 30-minute documentary, What Does It Cost? It's about what the states of Washington and Oregon and their incredibly insane push toward net free, no fossil fuels by 2040 and 2045, respectively. Okay, go on. It's the Discovery Institute, and it's only a 30-minute documentary. You need that information so you can go to your city councils, to your county commissioners, and explain to them the cost, because you can't just walk in, unfortunately, and say something as sane as there is no climate crisis, because people have been drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Because everybody's listening to what the establishment wants us to believe. By the way, this is another one. Hang on, it's not going forward. There's another, okay. Is it showing, do you see the agenda on your screen? It's just a white screen. It flashed on, okay. So now this is a longer documentary, but you have to watch it. It's called The Agenda, Their Vision, Your Future. It's about Agenda 2030. And it's going to spell out in documented terms. I mean, they did a masterful job. And I like this documentary even more because the other one, the only problem I have with it is that he never comes out and says, there is no climate emergency. This is all a big psyop. These people do. This was done by the Oracle Films out of Great Britain. Funny, because Great Britain is the source of so much of our problems. But the first hour of it spells out exactly not what's coming, but what they're implementing now in regard to Agenda 2030, the CBDCs, the geofencing. Elon Musk and his robo-taxis. You can catch a robo-taxi, which is an automated vehicle, a driverless vehicle, in Austin and Phoenix. He has several cities around the country. And the automobiles are contained by this geofencing. You can't see it. It's an invisible fence, but the cars can't drive past it. They're setting that infrastructure up because that's what they're going to use to not allow you to travel outside your zone, or at least your money won't be usable outside your zone. And those documentaries are going to explain all of that. This will give you, if you watch those two documentaries, especially that how much does it cost, which is specifically focuses on the states of Washington and Oregon, you're going to love that documentary because he talks in plain, simple terms about the money. That's it, because that's what's going to talk to the people on your city councils and county commissions. And the reason I'm saying city council and county commission, show of hands, just has anybody watched our documentary about carbon capture pipelines? Okay, a few hands. That's another one you need to watch because these two documentaries tell you the problem. Our documentary tells you how to solve it. Okay, so it's talking about carbon capture. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with carbon capture. Do you have it here in Washington State yet? They have plans for it. You'll find that out. They have plans for 96,000 miles of it. Every single state is going to be affected, but I don't know if it's come here yet. So George H.W. Bush signed us on to Agenda 21 in 1992. Bill Clinton forms a presidential commission to implement Agenda 21 here in the country. It's called Local Agenda 21. But the head of that commission was a man named J. Gary Lawrence, who's insider, CFR, and all that stuff. He wrote in their investigation papers, we're not going to call it Local Agenda 21. We're going to call these plans things like comprehensive plans, smart planning, smart growth. I challenge you to find one that does not hold. Every single county in this country has a comprehensive plan now, according to local Agenda 21 rules. And you'll know it because you'll see things like sustainable development, which is another communist term, right? Which has nothing to do with sustainable, and it's certainly not development. It's tearing down. It's depopulation. Is what it is. and things like, the unsustainability of single-use automobiles and things like that. So and this is the thing, our tax money will fund these NGOs who come in with, and they've got all the glossy paperwork, and who wouldn't want sustainable development for your children and your children's children. And of course the county commissioners and the city councilmen, they're like, well, yeah, that sounds great. And the NGOs have all planned it all out. There's no work for the county commissioner to do. So they sign off on it. And now it's being implemented. And I'm not saying that your county commissioners are bad guys. They've been fooled too. So go to them with this information that you get from these 3 documentaries that I'm recommending, one of which is ours. You can see ours for free at standyourground.watch. Okay? And then I also have, anybody who wants this, I'll give it to you. I was in Wisconsin last month, and because I've been doing a lot of talks about carbon capture since our documentary just recently came out earlier this year. But the people in Wisconsin asked me, can you focus more on wind and solar, because that's what we're having to deal with right now? And I said, sure, no problem. So what I did instead was I made a presentation that they could take to their county commissioners and city councilmen. It's not labeled with any JBS labeling or anything, because that can get people mad, if they see labeling of a particular organization. So it's just a no frills, here's the cost. I kind of did it along the lines of what does it cost, but I did it for wind, solar. I did a comparison between nuclear, fossil fuels, wind, solar, and batteries. Who was talking about batteries earlier? Who was complaining about? Right. So the batteries are a huge, not only are they a huge psyop, but they're extremely dangerous too. So anyway, anybody who wants that presentation takes probably about an hour to go through it, but you don't have to use the whole thing because it's in chapters. I have one chapter on there's no climate crisis, and you don't even have to bring that up. Just focus on the part of it that talks about the costs, because that's what's going to talk to the city commissioners, the county commissioners. I will caution you that they have gotten wise to our shenanigans of trying to wake up the city and county commissions. At the state level in Wisconsin, for example, they've passed a law that if the solar, I don't call them farms, don't ever use their narrative. They are not farms. That's insulting to farmers. The solar facilities, the wind facilities, if it's above a certain number of megawatt power, it's up to the state whether it gets implemented or not. So they're passing these laws while we're sleeping, that make it so they're going to be able to just push this on through. So you need to be really up on what's going on at the state level too, but get to know your state legislators, get to know your county commissioners, and be friendly to them. You can become a trusted advisor. Just when somebody takes office, they don't magically know how to be a good legislator, and they rely on good on advisors. And if you are well read in this, and believe me, this doesn't take a college degree. You can do a little studying on this, take a few notes. It'll come pretty easy. It's really not that complicated. And you can be that trusted advisor. And we have tons of information at thenewamerican.com and at jbs.org. So, but this is why the John Birch Society was formed, in order to take action and save our country, save our God-given rights. And I would encourage you to join us, because we really are in the 11th hour. I mean, if this singularity happens and all that, the Great Reset and all this, God is going to win. He's going to, strike us with his avenging hand. But do we really want to put up with the penances, the additional penances that mankind will be imposed on mankind by our God, by a just God, after we allow this to happen? No, we don't. So that's why JBS exists, and I invite you to join. I've been a member since 1983, and I know my time's up now, so I guess we'll take questions. Yeah? So question and answer. Do we have a microphone? Because that's going to be kind of hard in this big room. Is there a microphone that we can pass around? Can you shout? Oh yeah, the documentary is called The Agenda, Their Vision, Your Future, and it's Oracle Films. They have a YouTube channel, Rumble channel, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. You can easy to find, super easy to find. Did you have a question? You had the same question? Oh, okay, well then that took care of it. I don't think we have any other questions, so I guess I answered everybody's questions. Larry, yeah. I think a lot of people are. Oh, he asked, what's the reaction of audiences as I travel around and give talks like this? And what's my take on, generally, my audiences tend to be very well read people and they already know. Like when I talk about things and I see a lot of that, I see a lot of nodding going on, and I'm like, okay, these people know. And so I mean, I don't know every single one of you, and I don't know where you are, so I kind of have to talk to the lowest common denominator, for people who don't necessarily know. So I hope I didn't bore you with a lot of information you already knew, but I feel like this kind of brings it all together and lets people know, no, it didn't just start in 2020. It didn't just start in the 19th century. It's been going on since Eve ate that apple. And notice, ladies, that Satan didn't go directly to Adam. He used the agency of the woman to take down society. And that's what he's doing now. We need to get back and truly be women, get back to the dignity of woman, and get back to being barefoot and pregnant and rocking that and not taking our hands off that cradle, because while we had our hands on that cradle, we ruled the world, right? And they know that. That's why they went after us. The feminist movement is probably the single most destructive thing that's happened to our country. Convincing women not to be mothers? What? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay. The agenda, their vision, your future. And I'm sorry, I don't know why it's not showing on the screen. I've got two hands up. Hang on, let me get back to you. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Well, there are some head scratching things that Trump's doing. And I think after considering that most of his administration, at least the higher ups, the ones that count, are members of the CFR and Trilateral Commission, should be pretty obvious. I mean, it's always the same. It's always the same people. I long for a day when we have a leader like Constantine or one of those that would have all of his troops going into battle saying the name of Jesus. And you have that symbol in the air, the cross that says "In hoc signo vinces," by this sign you shall conquer. While Jesus said, as long as you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father. I don't believe we're going to have God's blessing on our country while we have the sins crying to heaven for vengeance enshrined in our national law. We have willful murder in abortion. We have the sin of sodomy and gay marriage. We have oppression of the poor in the welfare system. We defraud laborers of their just wages and the income tax. These are sins crying to heaven for vengeance. Not going to get, God bless America. God have mercy on America. And I don't think Trump, I think that we're constantly marching toward the New World Order. There's nothing that Trump's doing right now. There are things that he's doing that are in the short term that are beneficial. Too tough. That's my attitude. You are not, and I don't think. I mean, he doesn't have the capability. If he tried to do anything truly effective, like rescind the income tax, you know, right, 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 and that's why it is important. You know, it is the way our Constitution is structured. We do have power at the state and local levels, which is the reason we're focusing in the JBS. We're focusing on that to say they know it too. Look at how they implemented Agenda 21. They went to the counties. It's all county level. They know that that's the way you play the game. You know, so we still have the ability to do it. Yes, ma'am. Right. 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 Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's what the John Birch Society is structured to have chapters all across the nation. So you're working at your local level on the same agenda items that I'm working at in Memphis, Tennessee. You know, but so you have this structure across the nation. You're working at a level where you can affect change. You can't do anything about the swamp in Washington D.C., but you can do something at your local level. You can actually meet with people one on one, meet with all these elected leaders at the local level, and like I said, become a trusted advisor. Where they call you, they're like, sustainable development. You know, I need to call Susie. You know, that kind of thing. So that's the reason Robert Welch structured it that way, and why we're the original grassroots organization. You know, 1958. That's a lot of years. Did you have another question? Uh, Not the majority. Never the majority. But you have to understand too, under 50, you're going to have parents who are dealing with jobs and kids, and you know, and over 50, you're going to have people who, you know, the kids are out of the house or at least in college, and there's a little bit more free time. You know, so, right. Yeah. College campuses it might be a little bit different, but no, the general, what in my experience though, but you bring up a good point. See, this is the reason they went after not only state, but church and state, because used to, and we don't understand this in our modern way of thinking because we've never experienced it. But back in the day, the church was there to protect the little guy from an encroaching government. So that's why they had to do the two-pronged attack, infiltrate the government, but infiltrate the church as well. I mean, you get way back, you had, you know, most of Europe was Catholic, right? And the church had what was called holy days of obligation, which are like, it's like a Sunday, but it's a weekday. It's a feast day, a very important feast day, like Christmas, you know, Christmas, holy day of obligation. There were more than 100 holy days of obligation throughout the year. Those are mandatory vacation days. I kind of like that system. That's kind of nice. And that was why. That was one of the, I mean, there was a spiritual aspect of it. That's a day reserved to praise God and worship God, but it's also a day to mandate vacation time, downtime, because we're not robots. We're not meant to work as hard as we do. We work like slaves in this country. It's absolutely ridiculous. And taxes just go up and up and up and up. I mean, think about the insanity of the federal government penalizing you for working. That's what the income tax is. That's insane. But we do it. There's actually no law signed, but we know somebody got axed for exposing that. Yes, sir. I don't want to say very much because I haven't been following it that closely. I don't like the fact that they're making his widow address the country tonight. I think she's doing that right now. I'll tell you what I told. I can't remember who I was talking to. Chuck, I was talking to you. Was I talking to you earlier about this? I think that we're being lied to. I'm not a ballistics expert, but my daddy did buy me a gun when I was 6 years old. That was my first one. And I've always noticed that when I shoot, a can or target or, pigeon, clay pigeon, it tends to move away from the direction that the projectile came. And they want us to believe that he moved toward the direction that the projectile came from, right? So that right there, I have a problem with that right off. I saw the video. The first time I saw the video, I was like, something's not right there. It's too clean. It's too close. You get that kind of power that puffs his shirt out. Did you see that? Do you agree? Again, I'm not a ballistics expert, but something about it just, I don't think that, I know we're not getting the full story. And I don't care what anyone says, a widow who is in shock and grieving, and they're making her go in front of the nation to address the nation. Are you kidding me? That's insane. Has anybody ever lost a loved one? Okay, let's look at it this way. This is something else I brought up. 2 days after JFK was horrifically assassinated in front of the country on TV, 2 days later, Jackie Onassis Kennedy came on and addressed the nation, right? No, she didn't. Nobody would ever. Are you kidding me? A widow with a boy and a girl, Erica, Kirk? Something's going on there. Somebody's making her do that. Somebody's holding a gun to her head. That's not natural. That would take a lot of talking to convince me that something's not going on there. Weird. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Oh, you did? Okay. Okay. Well, I hope so. I hope so. Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. I do. I haven't seen it. I mean, I fully admit I haven't seen it. But I can also say that when you're hit by a bullet, you don't move toward the bullet. No. I'm not talking about when the blood was coming out. If you watch it in slow motion, anyway. We're getting on a rabbit hole, and we can talk about it later. And he wants the mic, so I better give it to him. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming tonight.
Keep going on here. We'll have to call the Warren Commission in. I want everybody to put their hands together for Rebecca, her time and her presentation. Please join with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now then, you got a tremendous amount of information blasted at you. Huge amount of information tonight. So much that if you didn't have much of a background in what she was talking about, it would be hard to understand and absorb. We meet in this county second Tuesday of every month at the old Skagit Gun Club on the Wilson Road. And we're in the business of building your informational foundation so that presentations like this make sense. Because not everybody's as smart as she is. I know I'm not. So, Birch Society, Birch Society has a tremendous amount of audio and visual information, phenomenal amount of written material. It's incumbent upon us to understand, to take this home to our children and our grandchildren. If we don't understand history, it's damn sure going to repeat itself. So, like I'm saying, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And thank all of you. Yes, Mary. No, I lied to you. It's the second Friday of every month. Mary, you've known me long enough. You know I lie. Okay. Second Friday every month, 6 o'clock. We got to start early so Judy can get home and get to bed on time. So, okay. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. That was so kind of you. Huh? What'd she say?
I don't know.